Hello and welcome to Elevisa, the podcast and accompanying masterclasses guiding women to reconnect with their sexual pleasure. Hello everybody and welcome to today's Elevisa podcast, really our first official one. Although there won't be a class following today's podcast like with the rest of our podcasts, this is just an introductory one, be introducing you into what our classes are all about. So thank you for joining me on this journey of feminine discovery. And I really look forward to you joining me regularly on this journey of rediscovery, finding some me time, which is really precious these days, to basically enjoy some deep, deep relaxation and hopefully discover, rediscover, or just enjoy exploring your own sexual energy and reawakening. So let me begin this podcast with some full disclosure. I'm not a doctor and I am not a therapist. Elevisa is designed to be a safe space where I hope to create a community of like-minded women wanting to explore themselves and reignite and turning on their female sexual energy. If you've suffered sexual trauma, perhaps experienced a traumatic birth or have any issues down there, then you should consult a therapist or GP before embarking on this journey of discovery with me. We will also be participating in gentle exercise through all these classes, including yoga and Pilates type moves and stretches. Therefore, if you have any issues with your back, your hips, or any long-term injuries that affect your exercising usually, then you should also contact a doctor or medical practitioner before embarking on this course. So what is Elevisa? Well, the name came from the Greek words for female empowerment and sexuality and combined to create Elevisa. And why did I decide to embark on this journey? Well, I had been neglecting myself for several years. I've always kept up exercise and eaten well, but I'd neglected my sexual needs, my sexual desires, and without being aware of it, I'd actually become quite frustrated, which often caused kind of anger and resentment even sometimes. I was quite a lot more needy than my partner, had more sexual needs, and I can't always expect him to be there to basically provide my sexual pleasure. But I wasn't giving my own time for my own sexual pleasure either, which is why I sort of realised that perhaps this is something that I needed to embark on for me. So when people have generally self-pleasured in the past, they perhaps use something like a vibrator, be given a gift perhaps, and often become kind of overwhelmed after that kind of initial experimenting with it, perhaps overcome with a feeling of a sense of guilt, shame, embarrassment, even anxiety sometimes. And I'd often convince myself that there's something wrong with me for having these sexual cravings, or afterwards sort of, again, just become overwhelmed by this sort of sense of shame, or like, oh, what did I just do? Why did I do that? Feeling like it was wrong. But however, I'd really enjoyed that kind of sense of relief and really enjoy pleasuring myself. And I began to ask myself, why do females so typically shy away or turn their back on their own sexual pleasure? Why do we do it? We hear about men sort of talking about it quite openly, and we accept that all the time. But for women, it seems like taboo, like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that as women, as ladies, perhaps. It's all very kind of strange. And if we look back to it, our first conversations as women of sex are often whispered in the dark, perhaps with a mother or a friend, or in school from the school nurse, almost very medical-like. There's certainly no talk, or at least back in our day, in my age group, of any kind of female sexual pleasure. And we spend so much time as women being brainwashed about negative aspects of sex as young women. For example, where do I start? Unwanted pregnancies we're told of from the very beginning, STDs. We're always told about kind of rape and what we should do, periods, everything related to down there is often kind of this real kind of negative connotation right from the very start. Think about when we talk about virginity, it's always for women, it's almost you're giving away your virginity as if you're giving this massive gift to somebody. But we don't often talk about when we give away our virginity about us having the pleasure from it or enjoying that. It's, again, kind of a very negative connotation around it. And this stirs up from a very young age, from our younger teen years quite often, that, sex is quite a negative thing, let alone female sexual pleasure. And we're never taught in schools, obviously, about that side of things either. There's way more taboo than when we talk about kind of men self-pleasuring themselves and things, which is just sort of a given. So we've often had no experience of our own sexual pleasure before having sex for the first time, let alone the second, third, or however many times afterwards. We just embark on our sexual journeys without any consideration, or at least the majority of us. Perhaps some of us have, who are very lucky. So many girls, for example, before they've even had sex, have never actually even explored themselves down there, never touched themselves, never looked at themselves either, let alone masturbated. So how can you have any clue what your sexual preference is? What turns you on? What makes you excited? What gives you sexual pleasure? The more you sort of think about it, how mad it is. We're designed for this. We're designed to have sex as women, to reproduce. It's really important. Aspect of our lives, yet when it comes to the kind of pleasure side of it, it's just totally neglected. And then again, how many of us can truly open up to our friends about our sex life? Perhaps they come across in conversations, but how deep do we get with those conversations? It wasn't until one day I was sitting down with about 10 girlfriends, and we'd been talking, we'd all been married for a while, talk about how regularly or irregularly we had sex. And I turned around and asked them, do you pleasure yourself? And again, it was suddenly confronted with these blank faces, almost very embarrassed, shied away. These people that I knew everything about my childbirth, everything. But when I suddenly mentioned about sexual pleasure and self-pleasuring, they all sort of were taken aback, and nobody really had admitted it or tried, but it was nothing regular in their lives, maybe something they tried once or twice or never got the hang of, or had no idea how to give themselves any pleasure, let alone an orgasm. And the amount of them that had actually never had an orgasm with their sexual partners, it just seemed crazy. And again, as we tried to pursue the conversation, they were just sort of shying away. It was this guilt, this shame about it. We don't do that as women, and that's not how we're meant to be. I just suddenly thought, this is absolutely absurd. They were talking about how they knew their husbands and things were still doing, and it was sort of funny and giggly and stuff. It's but for us, it's wrong. It just seemed crazy. And it brought myself to that kind of question: why are we not, as women, looking after ourselves and fulfilling our sexual needs? At the same time, I've recently been writing a book, and this is where it kind of reignited my passion for this, or made me think, we really need to get this out there. And I've been writing a book about two women back in the Victorian days, and the kind of coming of age story of how they explored themselves and their initial embarkments into their sexual journeys, and how primitive it was. And it suddenly got me thinking, actually, it's not much different over 100 years later. But the one thing it was doing when I was writing about these women and their sexual experiences is it was heightening my sort of sexual awareness. And I was finding that I actually needed to give myself some time to actually release that. It was almost like becoming a bit of an erotic sort of journey at the same time for me. So I needed a space to vent. And I started to think, actually, this is the time to perhaps look on this journey and kind of create a group and see if there's anybody else out there who perhaps might want to join me on this journey. So I'd initially thought about doing this podcast, I think, for the last 3 to 5 years, but I'd always hesitated. I got to the point where I was almost going to record and brand it, and then I'd be like, oh no, I can't do this, and this is not the right time, or I just lacked the confidence, wondering, will people judge me? Will they think I'm sex mad, an addict perhaps? Will they see me as a sex worker or somebody who's dirty? It was really quite frightening. It's funny because when I was looking for other podcasts in the field, there is some out there, but there are a lot of American ones, and there was nobody really from a kind of British side of things, which I found also incredibly interesting. And we're always renowned as Brits as being kind of very prudish and not in touch with ourselves. And I was like, okay, now is the time to do it. So I'm really excited to share my experiences and the positive experience I've had along the way. And how I'm starting to look after my sexual needs. And I really hope Elevisa can be something that helps others too at the same time. So let's begin. Let me ask you, when was the last time you explored yourself? Have you ever explored yourself in reality? When did you last orgasm? Have you ever orgasmed? Are you able to orgasm with your partner? Or are you able to orgasm, through your own through masturbation, or are you able to make yourself orgasm? Probably a lot of you are saying no and feeling like, gosh, oh my gosh, that's bad. That's fine. You're definitely not alone, speaking to my friends. Or perhaps it's been a long while ago, or it's something that you've not done regularly, or it's something you've really neglected recently. It's time to re-embark on that. And that's when the idea of Elevisa came about for me. And it basically was ignited by me wanting to create a safe space for women to discover, rediscover, or just find the importance of female pleasure and what a huge tension and stress relief it can be, as well as so relaxing and, of course, most importantly, pleasurable too. It can also be really empowering too at the same time. So often women don't know where to start, or have jumped in the deep end by buying themselves or being gifted a dildo and playing with it with no foreplay, going full on like diving into the pool for the first time without learning how to swim. Sex toys are great, they have a great place, and we'll definitely be looking at them in future classes. But we should be giving ourselves the full journey here, introducing deep relaxation, getting ourselves in the mood, foreplay, an intimate massage, really opening ourselves up before climaxing. Otherwise, if you're jumping in the deep end, just sort of laying down one evening with a dildo, going straight in full blast, it can often be overstimulating and leave you almost even more frustrated at the end. We don't allow ourselves enough time. It's almost like trying to go to the gym and doing the whole workout in 3 minutes using every single machine. You're just going to mess yourself up, give yourself an injury, and you're going to do your body no good. Which brings me on to, we all spend money on the gym, memberships, perhaps massage, going to a spa, exercises, and well-being, whether it's well-being supplements, eating healthily. But we don't spend any kind of money on embarking on a journey of finding our own sexual pleasure, because there's such a stigma around it. I mean, how many of you are going to sit down and talk to one another about I've embarked on this journey. It's really, really good. Why don't you join it? Have you tried it? Because it's very secretive. And you know what? If you want this to remain private, that is absolutely fine. It can be your personal private, journey. But it seems wrong to neglect yourself or deprive yourself from exploring this, or at least giving it a really good go. So why should we be reconnecting with our female pleasure? We all have sexual needs, or at least the majority of us do have sexual needs. There are a few of us out there that are asexual, and that's absolutely fine. And this class probably isn't for you. But for those of us that do have sexual needs, and you may manage to maybe bury them or deny yourselves of them or just pack them away in a corner, it's maybe time to sort of, reconnect with them. We need to, as women, allow ourselves that me time. We definitely are renowned for not giving ourselves time. Time to reconnect with ourselves again and explore ourselves and discover what we enjoy. There's lots of changes within our sexual pleasure as we age as well. What we enjoyed in our 20s and explored within our 20s isn't going to be the same in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. There's lots of things that happen throughout our lives that can change our sexual needs as well. Might have been through childbirth, might have had different partners that have allowed us to explore different things. It might have changed our sexual preferences, been through the menopause, for goodness sake. Everything has an effect on our sexual pleasure. So perhaps if you have neglected yourself for a while, what you enjoyed last time, perhaps you sat down to self-pleasure, is not going to be what you enjoy now. And there again, even with my classes, there may be sort of things that you really connect with and enjoy, and other classes that you think, actually, you know what, this sort of level of things is not for me. Give it a try, find what you enjoy. So why not give it a try? Follow the first 5 sessions, which are very sort of simple, very down to earth, very comfortable, just gradually introducing you to the, reconnecting with yourself very, very gently at the beginning, and see where it goes. Then after that, we're going to be experimenting with some other things, and you might decide to come and join us and try different things, or you might want to sort of repeat some of the first classes and keep it light to begin with until you increase your confidence, or kind of really rediscover that connection with yourself. So how should you prepare for one of our classes? Most importantly, set yourself up a safe and sensual place. So don't just run home from work, put your bags down and go upstairs and find a space. Dim the lights, light some candles, make sure everybody's out. Perhaps there's a night when everybody else in your house is out doing things and you've got a half an hour to yourself. Take a nice hot bath, de-stress a bit, put the right heat on. If it's cooler in your house, grab a blanket so that you can keep yourself warm. That's absolutely fine. Make sure it's a quiet place where you're not going to get disturbed. Put a sign on the door saying deliveries, just leave at the front door. The last thing you want to do is really reconnected with yourself, got to that level of pleasure, and then the door knocks and you've got to go and sign for that package you've been waiting for 5 days. So make sure it's hopefully a time then you're not going to be disturbed as well. It doesn't matter where you do it, wherever you're comfortable. Perhaps there's space, you don't need much space actually. It might be in the side of your bedroom, perhaps your bathroom if you've got a nice sort of bathroom where you feel really kind of comfortable, perhaps downstairs in front of the fire if it's winter. You could even take it outside into your garden as long as it's safe and legal and you're not going to be disturbed or overseen by anybody, of course. We don't want to get into trouble for any of this. And let's face it, unfortunately, society does see naked bodies as very taboo, but we have to respect that. So make sure you're somewhere safe, sensual, and you can, most importantly, make yourself feel relaxed. So what do we call ourselves down there? Our private parts have become totally sexualized over the years, and our breasts included. Other than our giving birth, perhaps if that's been an experience you've been through, or visited the gynecologist, our private parts are very much kept in the dark, literally. When did you last have a look down there? Have you grabbed a mirror? Have you ever looked down there yourselves? Or has that always been left perhaps a medical practitioner? Again, that just seems crazy. We see the rest of our body, our faces all the time in the mirror, our bodies, we try on clothes. But how often do we actually look really up close down there? I'm not going to be making you do that for the first few sessions, but I will be doing a bonus episode where we have a look through images, and we'll have some time where hopefully you can go off and explore and have a look at your own self down there, perhaps for the first time, or perhaps for the first time in a long time. I think especially as well, if you've been through something like childbirth, you can actually almost be kind of afraid of looking down there. It will have, how all of ours will have changed down there over the years through age, and definitely post childbirth. So sure, we're always familiar with the correct terminology. We know that our names are vaginas. We all know that from a very young age, and we've used it, I'm sure, with doctors and the way we refer to it. But there's a huge amount of other names that we associate with down there. Often ones that are porn related, or, you know, have a negative connotation that we don't want to use. You know, pops that don't feel sexy, or feel like almost degrading when we name it. And then there's also the childish names that we've all had growing up, that we might have referred to it with our parents, or as we were kind of growing up, or perhaps with our own children, which is absolutely fine. But you perhaps don't want to use that in a context like this. So maybe, or maybe you haven't, but perhaps you've heard of the yoni, which is when you're doing kind of tantric yoga and things, what we refer to our vaginas as. And for the sake of this class, we will be referring to our vaginas as yonis. So get used to that. So if I'm talking about your yoni, that's where it's located. So what will a class look like? We'll be starting this journey really slow. We will be introducing ourselves initially to some gentle stretch work and pelvic floor exercises to start reigniting that area, along with some breath work as well at the same time. Eventually, we'll be moving on to body massage, including some intimate massage when we go forward to further classes. Initially, we'll be starting all of our classes clothed, so even the massage will just be over the top of our clothing. It won't be till much further on with our classes where perhaps we start to lose clothing or get even more intimate with our massages. So like I said, it's starting off as a very slow and steady journey. Typically, classes will begin with relaxing breath work and stretches before introducing body massage, and not just to our yonis, but to our whole body. It's awakening our whole body and our whole relaxation. This is about full body release and relaxation. Typically, classes will last between 30 and 45 minutes, with some bonus quickies along the way too. Our initial classes will last a bit shorter and be sort of around 20 to 30 minutes, while we're just sort of looking at kind of reawakening our systems as well. So how can you support and succeed in these classes? Firstly, avoid alcohol. Dutch courage is something we all have associated with sex, especially if it's been our first time. But when it comes to something this is our own journey, make sure you do it sober, and even more importantly, do it hydrated. So make sure you've had plenty of fluids beforehand or throughout the day. You don't want to have loads just before the class, because actually filling your bladder can sometimes be a bit annoying in these kind of classes. But make sure you're hydrated and avoid any kind of temptation to explore Dutch courage. Eat well. Try not to have any stodgy foods where you're feeling really bloated before class. Again, it can just make you feel uncomfortable. So, preferably do this, before you have a meal, and then eat afterwards. Quite often these kind of exercises and stimulations can actually increase your appetite. So waiting till afterwards and having your meal afterwards will be really, really useful again. Again, do your own exercise outside of these classes too. There are tons of yoga and Pilates classes online to help find your strength again, and especially your pelvic floor. If you've neglected your pelvic floor, it's really something you want to work on. And the more and more you build your pelvic floor strength, the more and more you'll get from these exercise classes. So where can you join these classes? So I'm hoping that the first few that I can actually release on YouTube and share with you to see if you can enjoy them and if it's something you'd like to get involved with. Unfortunately, as we get more intimate, it's not something I can do on YouTube anymore. And the place that I've decided to hold these classes, which will be small paid for classes, is going to be available on FanView or OnlyFans. Which again, don't hold back and gasp thinking, oh, I'm not going on one of those websites. You can just quickly go straight to my area. You don't need to sign up. You just need to create an account. You don't need to have profiles or anything on there. You can just go pay for one of these classes and do them. There'll be more information on these and coming up classes once they start to move on to those areas. So what equipment do you need? Well, essentially very little, just your private space, perhaps a yoga or Pilates or gym mat. If you haven't got one of those, really don't worry. A couple of towels or even your bed cover on the floor will be absolutely fine, especially for our first soft classes. You may also want a cover too to cover yourself if you're warm, if you're cooler in a later place when you want to maybe keep warmer towards the end of the class in the relaxation areas. You may also want a rolled up towel or cushion to help elevate yourself, especially if you've had some back problems. For future classes too, it's just quite good sometimes to have some elevation. But essentially the first session, all you will need is a safe central place and a mat of some kind, whether that's a yoga mat or Pilates mat or just a cover on the floor. In future sessions, we will be experimenting with some things. We'll be introducing yoni eggs, which is often used to help, again, build up strength and in exercise and increase sexual pleasure. And then also longer down the line, we will be using vibration wands and things. But I'll give you a good warning a week ahead of what you might need for the following week if we are going to introduce anything, to give you time to purchase those if you would like. If you don't have the accessories or don't want to get accessories involved, that's absolutely fine. All the classes that I design will still be able to be fully participated with or without any additional accessories as well. A question that I always get asked is, will you need lube? And that's entirely up to you. The idea of these classes is that we will encourage our bodies to create its own dew, allowing us to open up and allow intimate massage and to open up our sexuality. However, it may take you time to reach that level of pleasure. There is also a lot of other things that can cause feminine dryness, simply the time of the month, menopause, and the list just goes on, and that really doesn't matter. So if you want to have some lube by your side, go ahead. I just recommend that you make sure it's kept in a warm place so that when we're doing that kind of massage or you feel like you do need to introduce it into your practice, that it's warm. Putting on cold lube down there is a real pleasure killer. So one tip for you there. How should you expect to feel after class? Tired, perhaps? Maybe slightly heightened emotions? Really relaxed? Wanting more? All of that's great. If you're feeling anxious, worried, guilt, or any shame, don't worry too much as long as you're not too worried. That's fine. Like I said, my whole journey of this has been totally associated around that, and you don't just get rid of it overnight. But if it's a more kind of a deeper anxiety, you're feeling really kind of guilty or a lot of shame, it might be time to seek some extra help. Lots of people have had sort of sexual traumas without even realising it, or even traumatic births that really affect our experience and our own sexual pleasure. There's nothing wrong in going and seeking help, seeing a counsellor for a few sessions or regularly, whatever you need, just to kind of help you get in touch with that side of your life. You could find that it's really helpful. So again, a little bit of, worry or anxiety is fine, but if it's getting to the point where, it's slightly more elevated emotions and you're not feeling comfortable with it, I really do strongly advise that you get seek some help. A lot of it these days can also be done online as well, and it's definitely not a taboo subject when it comes to counselling and seeing therapists these days. So let's talk about next week's class, which is our first podcast that will have an actual class affiliated with it. Yes, I'm so excited to introduce you all to it. So heads up, there'll be no nudity and no intimate touching, just about trying to reawaken our sexual selves and getting in touch with our bodies again. So let's take it really, really steady. I'm going to try and make it available on YouTube and make it free. I'll also make sure that it is free to access on the platforms of OnlyFans and FanView at the beginning too, so you can have a go with it. It'll only be when it gets more intimate that I'll start bringing the class charges on, and I'll give that more information as we get there. The podcasts are always going to be accessible. So if you want to get involved in this journey, you can get in touch with me at elevisainfo@gmail.com. Follow me on TikTok at Elevisa90. At YouTube, I'm also at Elevisa90. You can also follow the classes on FanView or OnlyFans, and both of those were just at Elevisa. And of course, you can join our podcast on Apple Podcasts by searching for Elevisa. I really hope you're going to join me on the journey, and I can't wait till next week's session where we actually get down and try some of this exercise and reigniting ourselves and rediscovering ourselves. Until then, bye.